Okay, good afternoon. Looks like we're live. We'll wait a few minutes for people to come on. Okay, so good afternoon. It's Monday, December 7th. It is the 7th, right? I got the date right. It is 4:03, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. We are glad to be back. A lot of emails and a lot of questions came in this weekend, so we want to talk about a couple of those today, and then also talk about those Georgia runoff elections. Our sponsor today is the Cork Shop. If you're in Brantford, you know the Cork Shop well. They're a sponsor today because what people don't realize is the state has liquor sales. What you have to sell it at is already set, but they're allowed to create one item every month is something of a loss leader, so they're able to sell less than that price on a particular item. The Cork Shop has a wine, a Cabernet that they're selling, the Josh Cellars Cabernet, which is apparently really, really popular. I'm not a significant drinker. Definitely not wine. I tend to get really red when I drink, so I don't drink very often. But I was out Friday night too, and I got some allergic reaction to whatever drink I had in a restaurant in Old Saybrook. So I have to be careful. But if you're a Cabernet drinker and the Josh Cellars is pretty popular, it is significantly reduced at the Cork Shop. And the Cork Shop is locally owned. Jay Patel, really good guy and a veteran. So if you're supporting local, which I hope you do, especially now during COVID, please check out the Cork Shop in Brantford. So for topics today, some of the questions that we have coming in. Justin, how are you? David, how are you? David, are you in Florida or are you around here? David is a good friend of mine. We usually grab breakfast together sometimes at Hornet's Nest or on the weekends at the stand. We used to do Starbucks all the time, but obviously we can't do that much more because Starbucks, all the insides are closed. Somebody commented last week that I have an obsession with water bottles. Okay, that's great, but I do. I do try to drink as much water as I can. So some of the questions that came in, one was about Parkside and last Thursday's discussion. I'm going to read the exact question in 1 second. And by the way, there's not a ton of pressing news. From a political standpoint, this is the dead season. After the election to Christmas, really to the first week of January is a dead season. You do have a little bit more now because of Georgia, which is going to be extremely interesting. We'll talk about those polls, but it looks like Democrats have a very good chance of, at least better than it was just a few weeks ago, of winning. And that election is everything. Control of the United States government is tied around two elections, one regular, one runoff in Georgia. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the question was, can you explain your point about affordable housing in Brantford being for wealthier people than currently are there? So I think that question is about, well, I'm pretty sure it's about Parkside. We talked about Parkside in more detail last week. So in order to explain this, we have to understand what the purpose of the affordable housing law is and how it works. And when towns have less than 10% of their housing stock designated and deed restricted as affordable, that means certain changes happen with the state and with their planning and zoning laws, where many of the laws we have in planning and zoning become almost irrelevant. They'll tell you that's not true, but in practical purposes, that's what happens. And now it becomes, instead of the developer's obligation to prove this is a good project, it is on the town to prove that it's going to be an unsafe project. So it drastically changes how those laws are implemented and whose legal responsibility it is to support their arguments. Typically, when you're coming forward with an application, it's your responsibility. With affordable housing, it flips that around. So in order to deny such a project, you have to have grounds that are about public safety. Something significant, serious pollution issues or real significant traffic issues or what have you. So in this case, unlike most projects where we're going into an area where there's no housing now and they're building affordable housing, in this particular case, there already exists what counts as affordable housing. But to those that know Parkside, it's in Indian Neck. It's about 3 or 4 small buildings, 2 stories high. There's 50 units in them. And the people who live there now make, in general, nothing. Between 0 and 12 or 13,000. These guys are not making a lot of money. They may live on disability, become seniors. They can have some health, mental, what have you issues. But these are not people making a significant amount of money. Typically, affordable housing, in order to count as affordable housing, the units have to be at a certain percentage of the median income. Median income in Brantford is about $75,000. So you can have units in affordable housing that is at 80% of that, at 60% of that, and at 40% of that. I believe you can have some at 20% of that. So 80% of the $75,000 is a household making $60,000 a year. Obviously, we can keep going down 15,000 from there. So somebody at 60% would make 45,000 a year. So we're talking about people with jobs that are getting into affordable housing. So this is different than what most people think. Most people, you say affordable housing, they're thinking really low income housing. That's not necessarily the case. However, normally when you're going into a town that has 20 open acres and they want to go in the town and say, listen, we don't want this to be single family units. We want to put up 40 units of affordable housing. There's a fight, but they're adding to the affordable housing stock. With the Beacon project that they're proposing, where Parkside is, you're not adding to the affordable housing stock. You're replacing currently existing affordable housing. And because the people who are there now make such low income, and you're replacing them with people who are making 40, 60, or 80% of the median income, you are actually drastically increasing the income that people can make in those units. Not necessarily a bad thing, except you're now decreasing the housing stock for those that are most vulnerable, for those people living on disability. So if we had 50 units for people that were making $10,000, $12,000 a year and $900 a month disability check, we had 50 units for those. Now we're replacing it with, I believe, 62, 60 something units. And only, I think, 60 will be considered affordable housing, but many of them will be at the 80%. So $60,000 a year. Some will be at the 60%. So $45,000 a year. Some will be at the 40%. So $30,000 a year. And still considered affordable housing. So yes, we're replacing affordable housing with affordable housing, but we're in reality taking units at next to no income, the lowest of the low, and replacing them with people who are making $45,000 or $60,000 a year. That's the biggest problem from a social safety net standpoint. The issue we're bringing up is, unlike the vast majority of affordable housing projects where we're adding affordable housing where there isn't any, in this case, we're adding affordable housing, replacing existing affordable housing, and we now have Beacon that needs to make money from it. So they want to get those rents up. They're looking at 40 or 60 or 80% of the median income. So people with more money will go in there. There's just, history tells us people who earn more probably take care of those units better. So we now have Beacon that wants to make money. And we can understand that. All of this project started with really, really good intentions. The housing authority there, most of which are not on the board right now, started because those units are out of date. They're in terrible shape. They're very small. And they decided that there was no way to fix that and upgrade these units unless they tore these down. There was no way under the current structures to tear these down. So you have, when that happens, you put out a request for proposal, and a couple different companies sent in their proposals. There's some question on how Beacon was chosen. And I can see some of the fog there. I don't know for sure. I can't answer that question. The proponents say that it was pretty much pushed in Beacon's direction and no one else was given really a chance. Obviously, the housing authority would be against saying that. But in any event, there's some question there. But Beacon got it. Beacon does affordable housing projects. They make a lot of money doing affordable housing projects. So one of the problems was, yes, you have the issue with the residents. You also have the issue of available stock in town for people that are making next to nothing. So you want to make sure the residents there are taken care of. Beacon promises it. We don't know for sure. Will you actually take somebody making next to no money and put them in a 2-bedroom unit? It's hard to fathom that, but they've said it. Do you take them at their word? I'm not so sure. The second aspect is that the overall stock in Brantford for units that are for people that are making $6, $8, $10,000 a year on disability would diminish. You'd have less units for that demographic. The third item is you're taking 3 or 4 2-story structures and adding 1 4-story structure, essentially. And why is that? Now, could Beacon have come in and said, we're going to tear down what's there and rebuild it the same way? Yes, they can, but Beacon is going to manage this project for years. They want their management fees and the cost to manage the project to be lower. So creating 1 large building as opposed to 3 or 4 smaller buildings is much cheaper down the road. For example, if you have 4 buildings with 2 stories, because they have to be ADA compliant, you would likely need an elevator in all of those buildings. If you have 1 building, it's 1 elevator. The roofing, the management, the taking care of 1 structure, less outside, less weather impacts, all of those things play a significant role. So Beacon is looking at it saying, listen, we'll come in there and we'll do the improvements that you need. We'll tear down the buildings. We'll build this new state-of-the-art, beautiful 4-story building. It doesn't fit in the neighborhood at all, but their management costs long-term will be lower. I can't blame Beacon for doing that. They are looking to make money. They are a money-making enterprise. Nobody from Beacon, no employers from Beacon, no employees from Beacon are going to be living at Parkside. So they look at the bottom line. That's it. They're not humanitarians. They will paint themselves as humanitarians. The lawyers they hire will paint them as humanitarians. They don't give a shit about humans. They care about making money. They're a company. That's their job. They have investors. They have shareholders. I don't think they're publicly traded, but they have investors. They have to make money for those investors. So overall, the project, in my opinion, is bad for Brantford. It's bad for the social safety net. The people who are most desperate for those units are going to have less options if this project's gone, if it's done this way. The other side of that is if those units need fixing, they need to be upgraded. How do you upgrade it without having a Beacon? How do you upgrade it without a company that has the ability to build this and manage this and get access to state or federal grants? Beacon hasn't had an inside track for a while because primarily the head of Beacon is a former state employee who used to be in this department. So the thought process was she's incredibly well respected from in that circle, that she would have an easier time getting the money for the project. That has not happened so far. I don't know how anybody, any elected official, whether it's Rosa DeLauro or local officials, can say okay to the prices, the amount they were looking for, which was basically $400,000 per unit in federal tax breaks for, it's a tax program that allows corporations to put the money forward as a tax deduction. So that's the issue. We're not saying, what was the question? Can you explain your point about affordable housing in Brantford being for wealthier people? It's not for wealthy people. It's people who make more money than currently live there. So right now, if we have 50 units for people that are making literally next to nothing, we will have few, if any, of those units left. They've promised to find housing for the current people and move those over. They have stopped taking, from what I could see, applications. So they're trying to get as few of those people as possible if this thing gets built. But they'll move those people over. And I guess as they die or move out or what have you, they'll likely go back to regular rate, which means the people who need it come the future, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, will have less of those units available to them. That's why I can't support the project. It doesn't make sense. However, it doesn't mean I don't understand the other side of it. The units are out of date. They need to be upgraded. They need to be ADA compliant, and they're not. So you are in a catch-22. The perfect solution for it is to say to Beacon, let's find somewhere else to build. Let's build somewhere else near grocery stores, near public transportation, near bus lines, where there are sidewalks. Let's find that place, even if the town has to work with you to acquire that property or what have you, and then turn around, take Parkside, tear it down, and make it a park. That makes far more sense. You could probably get more than 60 units in a new location. And for the $23 million in tax cuts, that makes far more sense to me. The location where Parkside is now is a terrible location, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a vehicle, and most of those residents do not. There's no sidewalks anywhere. It's a terrible way to get to anywhere. The closest store is Karen's Corner, and that's a long walk away. So no buses, no public transportation, all of that stuff is gone. That's why the project doesn't make much sense. And so I hope that answers that question. Just remember, when we throw this word affordable housing around, it doesn't mean what you think it means. 80% of a median income, where the median income is $75,000 or $80,000, is still $60,000 a year. These are not people who are not working. The people in some neighborhoods will act like they're, coming from Fairhaven and terrible areas or what have you. That's not the case. But, and this idea that the cities can send people to Brantford is nonsense too. There's no favoritism given on where somebody's coming from to get in that spot. An application goes in and they're judged on the merits. So this thing where we're going to move city people to suburbs is just nonsense. But we will lose units for the people that are most in need. And that's the problem. We are increasing the average income of these units exponentially if we go to this project versus what's there now. Still, even if it doesn't get approved or they don't get the money, we have to do something with that location. It's run down and it needs significant upgrades. I don't believe people's motives were bad. I believe at the end of the day, we have a corporation that wants to make money. That's what they do. They've built a monster using government funding to build initial projects and then get revenue for decades later, if not a century later, on running those projects and profit from those projects. It's a good marketing plan if you're big enough and have the wherewithal to do it. The other question is there any chance of Costco coming back? I don't know where this came from. I have not talked about this in a while, but it's on the list here, so I'll talk about it. I have no inside information on Costco. I do have two people I talked to. One is still with Costco. I've not been told anything, anything specific on the project. I can tell you this. Costco pulled out because of cost. The location at Exit 56 is a perfect location, but it's an incredibly costly location. Not just from the cost of the property. That's high too, but the amount of things that have to happen around the property, to the roads, to the exits, the acquiring other property around it for Costco to happen were significant expenses. First of all, unlike most people think, the property, Costco was going on the Wayne Cook owned property. That's true. But Cook's property, based on zoning, does not fit it by himself. So in order to fit Costco, you had to acquire other acreage around it. So there's that cost. The Route 1 had to be shaved down to create sight lines. So they had to pave that out, repave it all, and that's a lot of money. They were redoing an exit ramp, redoing East Industrial Road, adding a new road in, covering a lot of wetlands to do that. There was an access road off 95 from East Industrial up to Costco. So it's not just buy the property and put it on there. It's all these other ancillary costs that had to be added in, and those were just going up and up and up. And listen, this happens all the time. Neighbors find out Costco's coming in, they up their price. And then they go to the state, to their transportation division, and they're like, well, we want this road done, we want this ramp done, and that suddenly ups the price. And then a neighbor across the street who could fight it, we don't want them to fight it, so we'll give them $50,000. So that ups the price. So suddenly you're paying 10 different property owners. You have the state demanding all these different changes, and the cost of that project jumps up significantly. Costco, yes, it's true, Costco withdrew their application. The argument that they withdrew their application because of some malfeasance, remember I wrote about this. I was the person who uncovered it. It made no sense for Costco to withdraw based on that report. And I can tell you I had extensive conversations with Costco representatives before and after I wrote that report, which was accurate. There was no question. Inside people in the department at the time, influenced, is putting it mildly, the peer review report about potential impacts of the project. However, it didn't make any sense for Costco to withdraw, because Costco generally expects to go to court after either they're approved or denied. We had a group, the BCRD, that was going to fight it in court no matter what, and if they were denied, they would have appealed to the appellate court anyway. If they were denied, they would have gone to appellate court. They would have been fighting the town, and the town was led by Jamie Cosgrove, who wanted Costco. So that appeal would have lasted 5 minutes. So it made no sense to pull the project if you wanted to go forward with it. The costs were too much. I've spoken to multiple people at Costco, multiple people who were part of the development team. The cost was too much, it was too high. Now, can they make money here? The last conversation I had with them was they wanted to come to Brantford. They wanted to get Lyme done first, or Old Lyme, whatever town it's in first, and then potentially Brantford. I do not know if that's still the plan. I would like it to see it here. I would like it to see it at 56. I think it's by far the best place for it. But I do not have an answer for you. I have no inside information on what's happening in corporate Costco on their expansion plans. And right now, I think, rightfully so, everything seems to be a little bit on hold with regards to COVID. So, although their stock is through the roof. Okay, so finally today, some emails are coming in now. We'll go through those in a little bit. Is this impact in Georgia? And so many people are asking about a stimulus package. It looks like there's going to be a $908 billion package. Yes, I am drinking more water. And that will include some more PPP money, which is desperately needed. If you are a town resident anywhere, but in Brantford along the shoreline, it is more imperative now than it was when COVID started that you spend money locally. And I happen to see the books from a lot of different restaurants. I don't know how they're going to make it. There are people in town, restaurant owners, who are borrowing against their homes to make this happen. Buy local if you can. If you have not lost your job. For so many people, they're just hoping, they're not saving money, they're hoping not to lose a lot. If you have not lost your job, if you're a two-income home, whatever, if you can afford it, eat out as often as you can and spread it around. Go to as many different restaurants as you can. Pick up. It's not going to be pretty. I don't see how some of these places are going to last 2 or 3 more months. We've seen some close already. We've seen some close early. I did say we were talking about COVID and restaurants closing, and Sherry's Bakery. Sherry's did not close because of COVID. They have some family health issues, but still, we're losing some restaurants in town. And I know, seeing some of the numbers, it's bad. So the PPP helped a lot of people. It kept them going. But you have an area where people are extremely hesitant to sit inside. They can't sit outside anymore. It's just takeout. We just need to keep pushing. I know you want to spend money on gifts. Make those gifts gift cards. For all of my clients, we're pushing gift cards like crazy. If you have gift cards, if you were given gift cards by somebody, may sound odd, try not to use them immediately. That company's using that money, but it'd be nice if they can come back and have to provide that food without getting more revenue when they're doing better. March, April, when it gets nicer and people can eat outside again, or their revenue numbers pick up. Try not to right now, but these businesses are struggling. We're hearing a lot, and there's going to be closings, some surprising closings, I think, over the next 2 to 3 months. And that's why this Georgia election is so big. So the polls right now are pretty amazing. The Democrats, according to, I'm looking at 538. So I look at 2 sites, 538 and Real Clear Politics. According to 538, with very slight leads, Ossoff leads Purdue 48.7% to 47.9%, so 0.8%. The Democrat leads. And in the Warnock race, Warnock is up, the Democrat, 2.2 points. So if you had asked me 2-3 weeks ago who would win those races, Republicans. Democrats have to win both. But if they win both, it's 50-50 in the Senate, and they have the White House, which means Kamala Harris breaks the tie. Democrats have control. What does that mean for the average person? Well, if you're Republican or Democrat, the ideology clearly is an issue. But from a stimulus package standpoint, after Biden takes office, you will likely have another stimulus package of $2 to $3 trillion. This new stimulus that they're talking about with the $908 billion, does not have that $1,200 payment. It cuts the $600 payment down to $300. This is, in my opinion, something's better than nothing, but it's stupid. This is the wrong time not to spend money. This is absolutely the right time that we should be spending money. We've said this many times on this podcast. When you give people who do not have money cash, they spend it. When people spend it, it helps businesses survive. I just encourage you to go out and eat and buy gift cards. The extra $600 would go towards that. Not all of it. Not everybody would spend it, but many, many would. And especially that 10% of people who are unemployed, those people who don't have money, they're going to spend it. So does it make sense to only pass 908? You're going to get some PPP, so some money for businesses. You're going to get an extra 300 for the unemployed. We had a really bad new jobs number last week. The numbers are not looking good, and we're entering winter. If Democrats take Georgia, you likely get a massive stimulus package after Biden takes office. If he doesn't, and by the way, I'm not in Georgia. None of my listeners are in Georgia, so this doesn't impact who wins or who doesn't. And I'm not picking a side here, but the very real impact is for that bottom 9-10% of people who are really struggling now, and for those restaurants who desperately want more customers. The bigger the stimulus, the better. And it's one thing to provide a stimulus that gets us through 14 months of a 16-month pandemic, and those final 2 months will kill us. That doesn't make any sense. Now is not the time to be stingy. Now is not the time to worry about the deficit. And I'll call out the Republicans again. You clearly didn't care about the deficit when you passed a big tax cut. So to be talking about it now doesn't make any sense. But that's what's at stake with the Georgia election, and that's a big deal. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Justin, Cafe Fair last Friday was packed. Inside or outside, Justin? While you get back, I will say this. Cafe Fiore, if you're starting a business from scratch, nailed it. Just nailed it. They have good food, right? I don't know that Cafe Fiore is my, it's my birthday or some big thing, whatever it is. That's not my, oh my God, I have to go to Cafe Fiore for that event. But they're priced well. The food's very good. And by the way, they're not an advertiser with me. They're not a marketing partner. And those damn bread things, they have these garlic bread you get on the table, just comes with all the meals. That's absurd. It's so unbelievable. It's delicious. And they bring it to you and they bring more. And by the time you're done, it doesn't matter if the portion for dinner was like one ravioli, you wouldn't care because you ate so much that unbelievable bread. So if you go there, and you're ordering a meal with any sauce in it, save your bread to dip it afterwards. They'll bring you some more bread too. Phenomenal bread. But from a value standpoint, I think Cafe Fiore is one of the best restaurants in town. Now, I don't know if it's the best quality. Like from Italian, I'll take Rosso Vino. But the Cafe Fiore value, I think, is through the roof. The meals are like $21, $22 for the bread, salad, and a meal, and there's good sized portions. It's a very comfortable place. And if you can see outside is beautiful. They've done an unbelievable job, just as a business consultant perspective. That is a brilliantly run concept and business. They've just nailed it. And so, yeah, I'm glad to see they were packed. Unfortunately, not all restaurants are packed. But they also did a good job. Like if the weather is 50, they can pack outside. People will sit outside in a sweatshirt or even a light jacket. So they do a really, really good job. But a lot of these restaurants are suffering. It doesn't mean there's not some obligation on the restaurants to up their game, like Cafe Fiore has. Rosso Vino has seating outside. They're doing a ton of marketing, and again, not a partner of ours, but a ton of marketing with regards to delivery. We have done. People know this. I work with Hornet's Nest. We've done a whole dinner program that has. So it's still on the business to be creative about bringing in revenue, but as residents, we'd like to see some of these restaurants survive. Remember to help them out as often as you can. Okay, it's 4:30. I want to thank you for joining me. We are, this month is going to be hard unless there's some huge news story. And there really hasn't been. Most of the conversation I've been having have been what TV shows you're watching, what you're binge watching on Netflix. So if there's major news that comes forward, we'll talk about it. Major economic news. This is a slow time for the stock market. It's a slow time for politics in general. So we'll have these conversations, but please send us your questions, issues you want us to look at. I'd be glad to. Thanks for the ones that came in today. And we will be back live tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Guys, have a great night.